Have you ever had a Facebook page?
No. No.
Have you ever had a Facebook profile?
No.
Do you have a Facebook page?
No.
Do you have a Facebook profile?
No. I have Twitter.
What was also suggested by the same witness is that you specifically, and a leader in general, takes decisions alone, without consultation with our constituency. He says, you specifically. I then put a proposition to him that you're going to come here and attest to the systems that are in place in the EFF on how decisions are made. Do you want to take us through that?
Well, I don't even see why that is even arising, because Roots is not an expert on EFF, and he has never claimed to be. He's not a member. He will never be a member. He doesn't qualify because he's a racist, and the EFF doesn't accept racists as its members. And therefore, he doesn't even, he can't even have a claim of any sort when it comes to EFF processes. The EFF, my lord, a member joins with 10 rand for 2 years and is issued with a membership card, and that member then participates in the branch. A branch must have 100 members for it to elect its own leadership. The member will belong there, and they will discuss issues affecting society and the EFF at the branch, which will ultimately lead to the regional People's Assembly, where branches of the EFF in Johannesburg or a particular region come together in a conference to discuss issues of the EFF and elect their own leadership and take their own resolution. It will happen with the province and ultimately what we call a National People's Assembly, where more than 4,000 delegates come together to discuss issues affecting society, to receive a report from the president, the secretary, and the treasurer, and also elect members of the Central Command Team, which is the highest decision-making body between the National People's Assemblies, which takes decisions from time to time. So that's how decisions of the EFF are taken. But because there are 4,000 black people under one roof, majority of them, Roots will think like that about them, because that's how racists think about our people. That they can't think that there is a one man who dictates to them. Amongst our people, my lord, we've got lawyers, senior counsels, we've got PhD students, we've got former leaders of the Feast Must Fall generation, very militant and radical, who don't take instructions from anyone because their upbringing has always been like that, defiance of the system, and therefore no one can just dictate to them. These are critical thinkers. The EFF prides itself that of all political parties, the EFF thrive through superior logic. And that superior logic cannot come from one individual. It will be ideas of the best of the best. So Roots will not have that appreciation, because the black people Roots know the first black person he saw is a domestic worker in his house when he grew up. The second black person he saw was a security guard at the gate when he got out. The third black person he saw was a cashier at the shop owned by white people. The fourth black person he saw was the cleaners where he went to school. Those are the blacks he has had an interaction with. And he thinks of us like that, because that is his exposure to black people. And therefore, always characterizing us as non-thinkers, as baboons, as people who can't think. That's why if they hear a leader says, kill the Boer, they can go into the house and take machete and go and kill people. Because these are non-thinkers. That's how they view us, that's how they characterize us. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves in a society where we coexist with such people who look at us and who think of us like that. We don't think like that about them. Our leaders never thought of like that about them. Despite the fact that they engaged in genocide of black people when they came here, despite conquering us in the wars of dispossession, despite killing kids in 1976 and in the 80s, we don't think of them like that. We never thought of them like that, but they think like that about us. That's very bad.
Just to wrap up this point, has Mr. Rhodes ever been to any of the EFF processes that lead to decisions that you've referred to now?
No, he has never been.
Let's then revert to the video I wanted to play earlier. I understand now it is on screen, it's available. Just to give the context again for the benefit of the court. It's a clip of the former president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, giving evidence at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Firstly, I'll play it in full, it's about 3 minutes long, and then I'll ask you to play it again with interruptions.
They would be doing this thing. It's not a statement. You see, part of the problem with this is that somebody who comes from outside of that African culture interpreted it. And indeed, when you then write there, Peter Mokaba said, kill a Boer, kill a farmer, he didn't. In the sense of a statement which represents policy. And it would not have been taken as a statement that represents policy. So there's no ANC policy which says kill a farmer, kill a Boer, and all that. But there would be a language of all sorts. You have a Zulu song, not quite a Gwijo, but it's traditional songs. Now, it's not a statement. It's not a statement I'm making that I will never visit Zululand. It's a song. I don't think we really... I really don't think that this... Certainly, I don't know Peter, whether Peter is here. He likes doing these things. And you could do different ones and you could translate them. The different chants. And they would be saying different things. Different things about the struggle. This particular one was picked out, as I say, and interpreted from outside of African culture and presented as a political statement. It never was.
Would I be correct in saying that what you've communicated to us is more or less what we have in most traditional cultures, also Afrikaans songs, like Simbamba, Mama se kindjie, draai sy nek om, gooi hom in die sloot, trap op sy kop, en is hy dood, but you rock the baby to sleep.
Now, we're going to replay that video, and this time I'm going to ask for your comment at every pause, Mr. Malema. Perhaps I should have the laptop, so I'll just tap you then you pause. Is that fine? Yeah.
They would be doing this thing. It's not a statement. You see, part of the problem with this is that somebody who comes from outside of that African culture interpreted it. And indeed, when you then write there, Peter...
Now, did you hear the statement?
Yes.
Does it align with the testimony you've given earlier?
Yes.
In literally 2 sentences at most, nothing more. Just capture the idea again.
Well, the songs, like former President Mbeki says, they are not taken in a literal meaning. They are understood to be the songs, they are chants that get to be sung in political gatherings for agitation. But, you know, the struggle songs were also used to communicate the difficulty we're confronted with through song. Because we Africans,
That's
when
7
we are
sentences,
angry,
Mr. Mandela.
oh,
I'm so sorry. I think you've captured the point, and I really apologize for that.
no problem.
Mokaba said, kill the Boer, kill a farmer. He didn't. In the
Again, let's stop there. He makes reference to Peter Mokaba. Do you know who Peter Mokaba is?
Yeah, I know Peter. I was mentored by Peter amongst many other people. Peter comes from Polokwane. Peter, at that time, was one of the few popular politicians from Polokwane and the entire Limpopo province. And we grew up looking up to him. I worked with Comrade Peter, and even when he passed on, we were still in contact. He's a former president of the ANC Youth League, and I'm a former president of the ANC Youth League.
Yes. Do you share any of his ideas?
I share all of his ideas. We were brought up by him. Peter, Winnie Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, Castle Matale, and many others. They are the ones who mentored us. They are the ones who taught us the ABCs of politics.
Yes.
And Peter didn't have a policy of killing people. Actually, Peter operated with a lot of white patriots and white comrades in South Africa. I think he had more white people involved in his life. Actually, we were getting introduced to white people by Peter. Some of the white people I know were introduced to me by Peter. These songs that Peter sang, my Lord, if they did not erase them on YouTube and everywhere else, you'll actually see Peter singing, and Slovo and Ronnie Castles and other white comrades chanting along with him. And why would they chant with a person who's calling for their killing? It doesn't make sense.
Because context matters.
It's context. And they understood. That's why they joined the struggle. That's why they could join in the singing of those songs. Because they understood it's not directed at their skin color.
Okay. Now, you might have been at the sauna, you might not have been. You might have been watching, you might not have been. There was a point where Mr. Rhodes led evidence about farm murders that happened in the year 1993. Mm-hmm. And I want you to bear in mind the year 1993. Mm-hmm. And what his evidence was a graph. And the graph purported to show the number of farm murders per week in 1993 only. The suggestion was this, and in fairness to Mr. Rhodes, he didn't say as a matter of fact that's the conclusion he reaches. However, he draws inferences that are probable or something along those lines. I might be misquoting him, but the idea is the same. That he's not saying as a matter of fact, but he's saying, well, these figures could be suggesting something. And I put it to him, what's the suggestion? The suggestion went along the lines of, Peter Mokaba sang the song, Kill the Boer. Let's call it week 1. On that week, my memory serves me well, there was just one person that died. The week after, and Mr. Rhodes calls it a spike. Maybe we might have to get into technical definitions of what a spike means. But what you see is an upward movement. So there's a gradient movement, 45 degree of a sort, where there's 3 people, 4 people the next week, 5 people the third week, and then it starts sloping down again. He says that spike, he proposes, not as evidence, but as a suggestion, that it was because of the singing of the song by Peter Mokaba at week 1. Do you have a comment for that proposition?
Peter Mokaba, I think, joined the struggle way back, like in the 1970s, 76, in Mankweng Fort, sang the songs, came into prominence late 70s, 80s, but he was more popular in the UDF. It was more popular also towards the late 80s, 85, 86, declaration of the state of emergency, when he got elected president of the South African Youth Congress. Peter sang the song throughout that period until 1993. So Roots, if he wants to be a scholar who came here and he wasted Cost's time to advertise his personal book at the state resources by sitting here and keeping the court busy, promoting a book without thorough research. If he was honest, he should have said to us, Peter Mokaba sang this song so many times. And every time Peter Mokaba sang the song, there was a spike. Not only in 1993, because that type of research is extremely subjective and seeks to favor a certain narrative. Let's do this, my lord. Peter Mokaba has long died. Peter has long died. The farmers are still being killed today. Unless Ruth says Peter is singing the song from the grave. But farmers are being killed today. Why are the farmers being killed? It's not exclusively farmers. There is a problem of violent crime in South Africa. And farmers are not saved from that. Women are not saved from that. Children are not saved from that. There is a spike in murder in South Africa. There is a huge increase in murder in South Africa. It is not exclusively farmers who are being killed. South Africa, it's a crime scene. We exist in a crime scene. Anyway, if you want to take the farmers and compare them to what is happening in the township and compare them to what is happening to women, it's a drop in an ocean. Our people are dying like flies. But coming back to 1993, that is the year Chris Hani was killed. But before that, from the 90s coming this way, we had a problem of violence in South Africa. Black on black violence. There was political instability. People were killing each other. People were angry. And those who might have resorted to killing farmers as part of the attack that they are attacking the system, it happened in that context. We wanted to kill, by the way, and in a literal sense. They must thank Mandela for a very long time. Because when they killed Chris Hani, all we waited for was a statement from the Commander-in-Chief, President Mandela, saying to us, now let's go for them. Everybody was agitated at that time.
I'm so sorry, and I'll take you back.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow chronology.
Yes.
You've made reference to Mr. Mandela.
Yes.
Do you know him as being militant?
Very militant. Madiba was the most militant man who, president of the ANC, visited his home at some point and said to Mamwini, you must tell this Walter and Nelson that they don't own the ANC. They were the most militant and radical young people. Madiba, before prison, the ANC, NEC used to remind him many times, you are going to die because you are adventurous. They will kill you.
Yes.
That's how radical he was.
Let me understand. He was radical in that sense. Did his radicalism extend to literal military warfare?
There also was worse because it formed a military wing. Mandela's Youth League said to the ANC when it got formed, you are a sweetheart organization, we must turn you into a militant organization. They forced the ANC to adopt a radical program of action in 1949 as the Youth League. And that program, my lord, included the armed struggle as one of the 4 pillars of our struggle, which led to the formation of Umkhonto weSizwe. Mandela carried guns, by the way. They are still looking for his gun that he left at Lily's farm. Mandela carried guns for this country to be where it was the first trained combatant of Umkhonto weSizwe.
And that's the school and ideology you grew under politically?
Yes, those are our leaders.
Yes. Your Lordship, I'm minded that it's now 11:30. With that being said, the entirety of my evidence will be summed up as soon as this video finishes. I do not intend to keep you for more than 15 minutes. With the court's permission, can you conclude on the video and then we can start with the cross-examination after the tea break? As the court pleases. We will resume with the video where it ended.
In terms of a statement which represents policy, and it would not have been taken as a statement that represents policy. So there's no ANC policy which says kill a farmer, kill a Boer, and all that.
Now, I understand President Mbeki to be drawing contrasts, and you correct me if I'm wrong. He seems to me to say there are 2 ways of looking at a song. There is the literal sense of the song, kill the Boer, which can mean nothing other than kill the Boer in the literal sense from that paradigm. You then paradigm shift, and you look at it from a different prism, which is the cultural, African cultural dimension. Do you accept that's the proposition?
Yeah.
He then says, from the literal perspective, the song is not the policy of the ANC. Is that so?
Yes.
He says, from the African cultural perspective, which, by the way, earlier in the video says has been misunderstood by someone who doesn't understand that culture, is what the ANC actually means. The second aspect to it. Do you accept that as a proposition?
Yeah.
Let's keep playing.
But there would be a magwitch of all sorts. You have a Zulu song, not quite a Gwijo, but it's traditional songs. Now, it's not a statement. It's not a statement I'm making that I will never visit Zululand. It's a song. I don't think we really... I really don't think that this... Certainly, I don't know Peter, whether Peter is here. He likes doing these things. And you could do different ones and you could translate them. They're different chants. And they will be saying different things. Different things about the struggle. This particular one was picked out, as I say, and interpreted from outside of African culture and presented as a political statement. It never was.
I'm not going to ask you to comment on that. You've led sufficient evidence in respect of what you just said now. What now will come up is the commissioner from the TRC. In response to the evidence that was given by the former president, Thabo Mbeki, he says, and I'm suggesting this is what is going to come, he makes reference to an Afrikaans cultural necessary rhyme.
I don't know if, before you go there, I just want to draw my Lord's attention that in the interpretation of President Mbeki, he stops at a point where he says, the song says, then when he interprets it, says, it says, I won't go to KwaZulu. But when it goes further, it says, I won't go to KwaZulu because my mother died there. At that time, President Mbeki, at the time he was singing this song, his mother was alive. So, and his mother didn't die in KwaZulu-Natal, therefore he will never go to KwaZulu-Natal. But he sings a song that says, I will not go to KwaZulu-Natal, my mother died there. But his mother is not dead, and he goes to KwaZulu-Natal anyway, to show that it's not in a literal meaning. He says, I will never go to KwaZulu-Natal, but he frequented KwaZulu-Natal. So I just thought the last part where he says, my mother died there, so I will not go there. But the mother was alive, and he still continued to go to KwaZulu-Natal, because that, if you take that literally, you will say, why is he in Natal? Because he said he will never go to Natal. His mother died there. Why is he saying his mother died there when his mother is still alive?
Yes. Maybe then I should have asked you that question, and I hope you will not deduct my invoice and put it in half because I didn't ask you a relevant question.
No, that's fine.
Let's then play the video. Just hold on, let me give context to it. This is now the TRC commissioner, and he's responding to the evidence of Mr. Mbeki. Let's hear what he says.
Would I be correct in saying that what you've communicated to us is more or less what we have in most traditional cultures, also Afrikaans songs, like Simbamba, Mama se kindjie, draai sy nek om, gooi hom in die sloot, trap op sy kop en is hy dood, but you rock the baby to sleep.
Now, that's in Afrikaans, and for the benefit of the public and of the court, I mean, of course, it can be put in dispute if the complainant so wishes. But the interpretation of the song we have in the English version is this. Again, context matters. This is a necessary rhyme, an Afrikaans cultural necessary rhyme. The translation of that rhyme is this. Siyambamba mommy's little one. Turn her neck around and throw her in the ditch. Stand on her head, and then she's dead. It's a necessary rhyme in a cultural context, Afrikaans cultural context. Now, Mr. Malema, we've had evidence of why context matters. And Mr. Mbeki told us why he has an interpretation of Kill the Boer song the way he does. The commissioner responds, interestingly enough, and says, well, sort of like in the Afrikaans culture, where we sing this necessary rhyme, are there parallels to be drawn? And if there are, to what extent?
Well, there will be differences in terms of cultures. Because for me, if you say that is what you use to make the baby sleep, it sounds so violent. To even be stand on the neck of the baby, it's a different culture. So, hey, we sing different songs. We don't sing violence to children to make them sleep. So, but that's what they do. There's nothing I can put more to it. But it sounds so violent, and someone can say, let's take the African parents to court because they stand on the neck of children for them to sleep. It can be completely misinterpreted. And when you give it, my Lord, the English version, it can even sound more violent. But when it is used in Afrikaans, and those who know Afrikaans hear it in that language, it may not sound as rough as is now. That's why we grew up being told that you cannot interpret African languages because there's a potential of a distortion there. So it goes into culture as well, which I'm not an expert, but we grew up knowing that you can't interpret African languages because they can be very offensive. You know, there are certain things we say in Pedi, and we're told Pedi can never be vulgar. But if you're to interpret that in English, my Lord will send me down straight to prison. How do you say such things in my court? But if I were to say it in the presence of Pedi elderly people, and I use it there in the correct context. So let me give you an example. There is a saying in Pedi that says, so which means a cow doesn't shit the whole poo. But if I say that to someone, it would be like, what are you saying now? So meaning, you don't have to say the whole thing. You have said enough. You can now stop. So, but if you interpret that, I can say this in a tribal hearing without the chief, without the headman taking offense. Because it is said in that context and they understand and appreciate the language and the culture. But if I come here and say that before my Lord, he will feel disrespected that I use offensive language in his court. That's what interpretation sometimes does to our languages.